Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I'm going to talk about all of the unread books in my house. This is not something I was planning to talk about on my channel. It's something that I started to take note of earlier this year as I'm trying to just kind of organize my physical books. So I've recently reorganized my shelf. Well, recently. It's been a few months now. But I decided when I did that to actually take note of all of the physical books that I own that I have not read, because unlike some people who I know really love having a bunch of unread books so they can take things off their shelves, almost like having a library at home, that's not me. I don't like being overwhelmed with too many unread books. I feel like they're just sitting there gathering dust, and it makes me feel a little bit guilty, I guess. But anyway, earlier this year, I started to actually write them down, number them, and then as I read them or DNF them or get rid of them or whatever, I cross them off and then update my little tally of how many I've read. So we're up to number 201 now, which is a lot. But I have read now 13 of those from my shelves, and I have DNF'd and got rid of one of those. So that's a total of 14 that I can now take off of this list, and that leaves me with 187 unread books on our shelves. I am currently reading, and will shortly finish, shortly as in sometime during the month of September, we'll finish 2 of those. So that leaves me with 185 books that remain unread. Many, and maybe even most of those books, are my husband's books. So I've mentioned this before, I don't buy a ton of books. I've been buying more secondhand books the past maybe year or two. So I have been bringing a few more books into our home, but most of these are my husband's because he just always bought books all the time. Some of my husband's books I have read, but many I have not. And there are lots of books that are my husband's that I have no interest in reading, so they'll remain unread by me, but that's fine. So I'm not going to go through all 185 books that I have not read, but I thought it might be interesting to some of you out there who are nosy like me and like to kind of peek into other people's bookshelves, that it might be interesting to just share maybe a selection of some of those books that I haven't read that have been sitting on my shelves. So I'm going to choose, I think, 5 books from each of these categories that I want to talk about. So I want to pull 5 books off my physical shelves that I'm really, really excited to read and kind of just don't know why I haven't grabbed them yet. I also want to pull 5 books that I'm embarrassed that I own and have not read yet. And I'm also going to pull 5 books that I will probably never read. So I'm going to go do that now, and then I will talk about those books. So I have pulled some books, and I want to start with the books that I'm really, really excited to get to. The first one is The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul by Douglas Adams. This is the sequel to Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, which I read, I think back in January and loved. It's like a comedic, the first one was like a comedic ghost story, mystery, detective mashup. I really loved it. And I just love Douglas Adams's writing. So I really want to read the sequel. So that's one I'm very excited to get to. The next one is a middle grade, of course, because I love middle grade. And I think probably my favorite middle grade of all time, or one of them, is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. So I'd really like to give this middle grade a try. It's the Graveyard Book, and it's about a boy who's, I think his parents were killed, and he escaped to the local graveyard to like escape the killer or something like that, who's after him, and he's being raised by ghosts. It just sounds so whimsical and delightful. So that's one I would really like to read sometime soon. So the next one I'm excited to read is a nonfiction. I really love nonfiction, and it's Death on Earth by Jules Howard. And this is about the evolution of mortality, like why things die and what. And I really love nonfiction, like I said, and I especially like nature and science writing, and a topic I'm really interested in, not just in nonfiction, but in fiction as well, is death and grief and how we deal with that. So I feel like this kind of mashes up two things that I'm interested in, and it's been sitting on my shelves for a while. I was super excited when it came in the mail, and that was a very long time ago, and it's just been sitting there. So I want to read it. Maybe I'll get to it for Nonfiction November. There's an idea. The next book is one that I got very recently. I found it in a little free library, and it is Silver Sparrow by Tayari Jones. I don't even really remember what this is about. I've just really wanted to read her since everyone raved about her book, An American Marriage. It's been all over BookTube, but also Silver Sparrow has really high ratings as well. Okay, so it's about two teenage girls, and their father is a bigamist. Okay, so one of them knows about the other family, and then one family does not know about his second family. So that's really interesting. But I just grabbed it because of the author, and everyone says that her writing is wonderful. So excited to get to that. And the last one that I'm really excited to get to is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I don't know a whole lot about this. I just wanted to read it because I think this is fantasy. I don't think it's sci-fi. I think it's fantasy. And I want to read more sci-fi and fantasy because those are genres that I do enjoy and I just haven't been picking up lately. And I also like dystopian and apocalyptic fiction as well. And this sounds like it's maybe an apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic fantasy. So that's a great mashup for me. It starts with the Great Red Rift across the heart of the world's sole continent, spewing ash that blots out the sun. So it sounds like there's some sort of cataclysmic event with the Earth's crust, maybe? I don't know. I don't care. People say it's good. She's another one of these authors that people rave about, and like I said, I want to pick up more science fiction and fantasy. Oh, and it won the Hugo Award in 2016, so that might be a good sign. So those are the books I'm really excited to get to. The next 5 books are ones that I am embarrassed have been sitting on my shelves for as long as they have. Now the first, I don't think a lot of people will get why I'm embarrassed, but it's the History of Middle-earth series by, well, not really by J.R.R. Tolkien. I know his son Christopher Tolkien had basically compiled his father's notes and I think maybe filled in the gaps. So anyway, most people probably wouldn't care about reading like essentially history texts about a fictional world, but I am such a Tolkien fan. I love The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and my husband has all of the History of Middle-earth. We have basically almost everything Tolkien ever wrote or his son Christopher ever wrote, and I just feel like a fraud calling myself a Tolkien fan when I have all of these histories that I haven't read any of, and I want to, and there's like, I don't know, like a dozen of them. There's so many. But yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed that I've owned these books. Well, my husband's owned these books for forever, and I haven't picked up a single one. So that's embarrassing to admit to maybe Tolkien geeks and no one else. So that's fine. The next one is Six Easy Pieces by Walter Mosley. And this is a series of 6 stories featuring a detective called Easy Rawlins, right? Yes, Easy Rawlins. And I love detective stories. This has been on my to-read list for years and years and years, basically since it was published, probably. And yeah, I don't know why I haven't picked it up. I love detective stories, and it's been on my TBR forever. And I saw it at a library sale like a couple years ago, grabbed it, and then didn't read it. The next one that I'm embarrassed to admit I haven't read is East of Eden. I have mentioned on this channel before that I am a fan of John Steinbeck's writing. I've only read a few of his books, but a couple of them were good. A couple of them were amazing in my view, and this is probably, I don't know if this is his most famous work. Maybe this is, I don't know where this falls in terms of fame or popularity or whatever, but his 3 most famous would be East of Eden, Grapes of Wrath, and Of Mice and Men. And I don't know how most people would rank those, but it's definitely up there, and I haven't read it. I say I love Steinbeck, and I haven't read East of Eden. So yeah, I'm probably not going to get to it this year. It's a kind of a big one, but maybe next year. The next book that I am embarrassed to admit I haven't read, and I own, is Jane Eyre. It sounds like something I'm going to love. I do often enjoy a gothic type of book, and this is just one of those books that, I mean, I know not everyone loves it, obviously, but a lot of people with varied reading tastes seem to all enjoy this. So I feel like I'll love it. I feel like this is, if I was going to make a 5-star prediction list, this would probably be on it. And I haven't read it yet. I think I'm going to do this for Victober this year. That's what I'm going to do. We're going to read this. We're going to read this. And the last book I am embarrassed to admit I have not read and I own is kind of a series of books, but the Discworld series. I have read the first 2. There are something like 40 or 50-ish books in that series, so I'm not necessarily embarrassed to admit that I haven't read all of them. I'll get to them in due course, but I do own the next 4 and haven't read them yet. So the last 5 books that I wanted to talk about are ones that are unread and will most likely stay that way. They are books of my husband's that I'm not interested in picking up anytime soon, and probably never. And the first one is this nonfiction, Letters of a Businessman to His Son by G. Kingsley Ward. I had heard of this before, so I think this is a pretty well-known nonfiction. It's exactly as the title would suggest. It's a series of letters from a businessman to his son, and it just sounds like something that I have zero interest in. I am a lover of nonfiction, but not all types or genres of nonfiction. If you have read this and you think like, no, Melissa, you'll really love this, leave a comment below. But I just, based on the title alone, I feel like this is something that I have no desire to ever read. The next book I don't think I'll ever read. It kind of pains me to say this, but Closing Time by Joseph Heller. It's the sequel to Catch-22. I loved Catch-22. I thought it was brilliant, but my husband read this and then basically said, if you don't want to ruin Catch-22 for yourself, you will not read the stinker, which really shocked me. So I'm going to take his recommendation and probably not read it. Again, unless someone can make a convincing argument and sway me, I think this is going to remain unread. I don't even know why we still have this. My husband gets more attached to books than I do, and I think he's more of a completionist in terms of series, so because we own Catch-22, I feel like he wants to keep the sequel to it, even though he said it sucked, but whatever. We own it. I haven't read it. I likely will never read it. The next 2 are another couple of nonfictions that are just on a topic that I don't care about and I find really boring, and that's mathematics. My husband loves math and physics, but mostly math. And he loves consuming nonfiction books about math, and I find it dreadfully, dreadfully boring. So the first is Flatterland by Ian Stewart. Apparently it explores our present understanding of the shape and origins of the universe, the nature of space, time, and matter, as well as modern geometries and their applications. And I just don't think it's for me. This does not sound like my cup of tea. My husband really liked it, but I don't think I'll be reading it. And the next one is The Millennium Problems by Keith Devlin. And this, well, the subtitle is The 7 Greatest Unsolved Mathematical Puzzles of Our Time. My husband not only loves math, but loves like math problems and unsolvable problems and those kinds of things. I know this probably sounds interesting to a lot of people, but this sounds like an absolute snooze fest to me. So the last book I want to talk about is actually a series of books that I don't think I'll ever read, and that's the rest of the Dune series. So that might shock some of you because I've mentioned how much I love Dune. I think it's one of the best science fictions of all time. I really enjoyed it. It's probably my husband's favorite book. He loves the book, loves the miniseries, loves all of it. But it's from his recommendation, so I'll probably read actually the next couple, I think. I'll have to ask my husband again which ones. He said there's basically a point during the series where you shouldn't continue because Frank Herbert's son takes over writing them, and apparently they jumped to Stark and just like, according to my husband, his opinions, but my husband is the biggest Dune fan I've ever met in my life, and so if he says, yeah, it's not worth reading past book 3 or 4 or whatever it is, I'm not going to. We own all of them, and I'll probably just, ask him where I should stop, and that's where I'll stop. And I won't waste my time reading books in the Dune universe that a Dune fanatic says are not worth my time. So those are all of the unread books that I wanted to share with you guys. Thanks, as always, for watching. Hope everyone's doing well, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.